Welcome to Rincon Valley Wine and Craft Beer. And today we're here with William Allen of Two Shepherds Winery. And we're going to be asking him questions about his wines, about his grapes, and his philosophy.
You've mentioned several wineries that you really like that are up and coming, like Brock and Idlewild and Rhyme. What concepts do you think they share that are really helping them to succeed, and in what ways do they differ?
It's a really, I've never been more excited about California wine as I have in the last 2 years. There's a growing trend towards these people. We've been very blessed too that John Bonet of the Chronicle is a huge champion and radar to these type of people. But I think what's similar is, even though we're classified as New World winemakers, most of us are making wine back to an old world philosophy, which is what it's what I personally buy and consume. So much less manipulation, picking grapes earlier for higher acidity, lower alcohol, typically little to no new oak, going back to neutral barrels which have no oak flavor or aroma, using concrete as a neutral vessel, going to obscure places to find obscure varieties so that there's nothing wrong with Chardonnay and Cabernet. They're the king and queen of wines, but it's great. The world has thousands of grape varieties. And, the people like Brock and Rhyme and Idlewild and myself and Forlorn Hope and Arno Roberts, and there's a huge list, we scour California for interesting varieties. Point in case, a bunch of us descended upon, there's a 100-year-old Grenache Gris vineyard in Mendocino. Most people don't even know what Grenache Gris is. It's a grape in that. And it was been my nirvana for 4 years to find something. And lo and behold, undiscovered and reclaimed is these 100-year-old, 6 to 8 foot tall, head trained Grenache Gris vines.
Wow.
So, for a lot of us, it's just wine is a passion, and we make the style wines that we like to drink, and that just drives us to constantly, what can we do that's new and interesting and exciting and yet old in very many ways.
Right, and we've met a lot of small winemakers who are really struggling to get found, and you seem to be in a completely different situation. You seem to have a very huge demand for your product, which is great. What advice would you give these new winemakers to get found, to create demand for their wine?
You have to get out there, and in an appropriate form. I mean, I've learned that there are places where I pour my wine where they're just not well received. People are looking for, larger, riper, heavily oaked wines. They're not going to love a Grenache Noir that tastes like Pinot that's been a neutral oak. But it's a matter of finding the right audience and then making yourselves available to them. Proper marketing. I've worked heavily in social media, so they have a following. I constantly am visible, not just with my own wines. I'm a lightning rod for many people. I probably help sell more other brands in some cases than I do my own, because people just learn to appreciate my palate. But it takes a few years. You have to build momentum, but you've got to be diligent and stay on it, and more importantly, have a focus and get to the right audience. And then, like I pour, if I have partners that place my wines, support them. Go to their places, go to their shops, get people in. The only way you're going to get people to buy your wine is if you get it in their glass.
Indeed, that's something we certainly try to do at our shop.
Can you talk a bit about the 2013 vintage and how it how it came out? And you were making wine last night.
Yeah, it was crazy. We had just finished last night at 10 o'clock. And as I was sharing earlier, normally by now I'm just getting ready to start most of my grapes, and I pick fairly low levels of ripeness. And it wasn't that we had a hot vintage. I think there's been some confusion on that. It's just that the vintage started really early, so ripeness is about the same. There were some unusual things. You had to really stay on your game in the vineyard this year because things started so early, and I think most winemakers have a similar philosophy. We don't just pay attention to ripeness, but we look at acid levels. Those are critical. I found myself bringing in some grapes at lower levels of ripeness earlier than ever to make sure I kept the balance of acidity. But it was, I think this is going to be as good a harvest as 12, perhaps even better. You never really know until you get through it, but overall I'm pleased. And it's really nice to be done at the end of October. We can all enjoy Thanksgiving this year for the first time since I can remember.
And you've mentioned in the places that a really good friend of yours is Alan Baker, who makes some really great Pinot Noir from this county. And when you two sit down and to have a glass of wine, what kind of wine do you drink, and what do you talk about?
That's an interesting conversation. I'm not sure we'll capture all that on video. But, Alan is one of my dearest friends and an inspiration. He makes really great wines. We sometimes differ in some of our philosophies, which is great because we love to sit down and debate on things. I would say he's more cerebral than I am as well. I tend to kind of go more for my gut, but we appreciate wines of similar style. Wines that are interesting, old world. Alan's an acid hound just like I am, so we just love to. It's dangerous when we get together because, you know, we'll usually bring a lot of wine together, and God knows how many bottles will just, you know, we won't get through more than a glass in a lot of them, but just, you know, wine ADHD, off we go. It's kind of fun. Usually by the end of the night, we're getting a little more heated, and our girlfriends are putting us in there. Okay, no more debating on this versus that. But it's a lot of fun, and he's been, you know, he started just before me and watching their success and differences in philosophies. They work with the tasting room. You know, they do such an amazing job at customer service and hospitality. And he makes wines that I won't make, and vice versa. So it's kind of fun that way as well.
What can a Rhone wine producer learn from a Pinot Noir producer?
I give Pinot Noir producers a lot of respect. I mean, I've not worked with it, and I may never. But yeah, just enough experience. It is one of the most challenging, finicky, high maintenance mistresses that there is to work with in the red wine family. So I just paying attention to some of their diligence and the things that they do. You know, I've learned I used to be very anti-cold soak, and some of the things that they've done to keep balance in a grape that's very easy to get out of balance, and a grape that expresses itself really well on the subtle end, and has a tendency to sometimes be made and I think lose some of that in the higher end. So finding that right balance of, you know, you can make Pinot, pick it too early, make it too ripe and lean and green, and you can make it like Cabernet, and finding that balance in the middle is really where I watch and learn from Pinot Noir makers.
You always seem to be on a mission to help people find and discover new and exciting things in wine, and you seem to have been pretty successful at that. What do you attribute that to?
It's I built a following in wine early. I'd like to say that everything that's happened has been this brilliant master plan. That would not be the truth. As I said, I tend to kind of go by my gut in some cases, and a path I think has happened somewhat organically, and I actually like it that way, and I'm keeping it that way. So before I was making wine commercially, I was making wine on the side as a garagiste, but I published one of the widest read wine blogs in the Bay Area, which is semi on life support right now. So people already, I had a following. They knew my palate. They knew the wines that I espoused. They knew that I was fairly direct about what I liked and didn't like. So it gave me some segue. And because of that, people still, you know, I am very active on social media with the wines that I love. I espouse them on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and a lot of people every week say, "Oh my God, I haven't seen that before. Where can I get a bottle?" And I think that helps the wine industry. It helps me because people know that I'm candid about wines that I like, and I love to share them. And I think we all, as the wine world discovers interesting wines that are something a little different, we all win together.